There's a pyramid of power with eyes that can see it all. Cameras to capture your image at City Hall. Realize they listen whenever you make a call. If you want a revolution, I'll really give it to y'all. Strength is the army that bands against bands of dead presidents, determining life of mankind of cancerous. How we breathe vapors, greed got us bleeding in streets for cheap paper.
Hello everybody. We are back on Horizon, and gonna do Phomiuna Aquaducts, but they killed the Minotaur without me, so guess I'm not doing that now. So instead we're gonna EXP. Be right back, folks. There we go. How's it going?
When Bird will be back.
Someone's shouting to buy Peacock Amulet, Bounding Boots. Why bound? What? They're trying to shout to buy the BC&M drops. Yes. Lord. Somebody wanted my PCA drop. They'd be paying me a lot of money for it. I mean, it's a low drop rate on here. I'd say between 2 and 5%. I personally think they should flip it back to how retail has it. Put leave the drop rate where it is. Put PCC on the BC&M. Put the Rare EX on Argus. Because as it is right now, it completely caters to the person that's going to no life camp Argus 24/7. Yeah. Up in arms. Be right back. My dog is wanting in. Alright, I'm back. Whew. I mean, one, I don't have time anymore, but I don't understand the mindset of wanting to no life a game anymore.
Some people are just stuck in their ways. And some people probably just have the time.
Dude, I wish I had that much time. But even then, I still wouldn't be spending it no lifing the game. Someone in another link shell just said they spend $48 a month on 14. And I just went, how many retainers do you need? I can't even fathom spending that much on that game. Like, it's a great game. I love the game. I have no reason to have more than 2 retainers. And like,
4 retainers. At the same time, I had every 80.
I have everything to 80, most things to 90. I have every crafter and gatherer to 90. Like, I don't even come close to filling up my inventory and my retainers.
Really?
Yeah.
So you're not about that glam.
Dude, glamour, what's it called?
Glam chat?
Yeah, like, the glamour dresser, that's it. I will say this. I don't have a bunch of different glams. I have pretty much one glam for each job. And then every once in a while, I'll do like a special event thing, and I'll set something up for that. Like at Halloween, on Halloween actually, like Halloween night, we did an all warrior Halloween themed Baldessian Arsenal run. And everybody dressed up in Halloween costumes. And so I made a glam for that.
Yeah, we did a Halloween event last year.
Tell you what, have you ever done Baldessian Arsenal? It is pre-Shadowbringers. It's the very last thing. It's the 56-man Savage Raid at the end of Eureka. Oh, the worst part of the whole thing. Pagos is awful on your first trip through. It's not so bad after you've gone through, whenever you have like really, like, once you've got a job that's been through it, you've got the max level already, and you're just grinding out another weapon. Pagos isn't bad, because if you go on the job that's already been through it, you've got armor that gives you elemental bonus, and you've got a weapon that gives you elemental bonus. And so you're so much stronger than everything. But like the hardest notorious monster fight, Lohi in Pagos, I can solo him on my warrior because I've got the full elemental set, and then I've got the finished weapon. And so all of that gives basically, where you're capped at level 35, it's like I'm like level 41. But the first time through Pagos though is a nightmare, especially when you can't Ethernet travel. Ugh. That zone's terrible. It is by far the worst part of all of Eureka. Like, Animos is okay. Pyros is alright. It's not bad. Hydatos is by far the best of the regular zones. Pagos is terrible. And then once you get through all of the Hydatos stuff and you can join in on Baldessian Arsenal, that's a lot of fun. It's hard, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, being a Final Fantasy XI player, Eureka is like a love letter to Final Fantasy players, or Final Fantasy XI players. I would argue that most of Eureka is basically like every part of Final Fantasy XI that no one really liked. Like, just the raw grind, and yeah, like most of it is a lot of. It's like Yoshi P went to the team and went, hey, we got a lot of players that used to play 11. Let's do something nice for them. Here are some hot topics that we've heard about from Final Fantasy XI. Let's throw them in something. Like, it's really what it's like, because 100% he did not play 11. Like, he was part of the WoW crowd, and arguably being part of the WoW crowd is a lot of what helped make Final Fantasy XI what it is, or Final Fantasy XIV what it is today, which is not a bad thing, even though I dislike WoW. Never cared for WoW. I felt like the gameplay was hollow. The story is just a mess. But
I've never been that big on WoW either.
yeah, he was a huge fan of WoW. Yeah. But you know 100% that, like, if he has played Final Fantasy XI, he made a character and logged in and did a couple things just to say, yeah, I've played it. Like, he's not played this game. He's played 14 a lot. I mean, he's a Savage Raider on 14, but he doesn't play 11. And I saw an article of somebody that was going through, like, his list of critical, iconic MMORPGs that have helped shape the genre into what it is today, and he didn't put Final Fantasy XI on it. And I would agree that Final Fantasy XI did not help shape the genre. The only game really that Final Fantasy was ever similar to was EverQuest 1. And that's because when they made Final Fantasy XI, EverQuest 1 was the hot new example of an MMO to look at, and so they modeled a lot of it after it. Yeah, and well, and I would put that at the fact that WoW was much more casual. It was casual but addictive. WoW's hardcore scene really didn't come along until probably, I would argue probably Wrath of the Lich King is when the hardcore scene came along. Because
stuff like that.
yeah, but outside of the outside of the end game, Yeah. But even with that, outside of the very end game stuff, it's very like it's always been very casual centric on the rest of the game. Not casual in the play style, but casual in the accessibility, in how much skill does it take to play the game versus how much skill does it take to be amazing at the game. So the hardcore scene of WoW being right at the end game and not really taking skill to get there, but taking a lot of skill to do it. Because I'm not saying the hardcore stuff in WoW is easy, because it's not. I would argue it's false difficulty in that it's usually like they take like the hard versions of the raids and then just number bloat them. But yeah. Yeah, but I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm saying getting there is easy. Final Fantasy 14 is the same thing. Like, the Savage raids are hard. They're hard on average, but getting to the Savage raids is extremely easy. Final Fantasy 11 is not that way. The whole game's hard. No. Yeah, because they've shaped it to be much more casual experience. I mean, literally. A few days ago. Yeah. A few days ago, I actually reactivated my retail account and started a brand new character. Like, I've still got my old characters, but I wanted to start from scratch and see what the beginning game was like. In one day, I was level 55 Thief and level 50 Warrior. And rank 6. And all of that was solo. All of it was solo. I was killing, with the 5 or 4 trusts that you can summon with that part of Rhapsodies of Vana'diel done. I was killing like IT mobs, taking on 3 to 4 at a time, and just soloing them down, chain 7 and 8 solo. And with the Echad ring giving 150% bonus, like, I'm getting 1,300 to 2,000 experience a kill. I'm getting a level every 3 to 4 kills. Yeah, so every chain. Rhapsody in white, Rhapsody in crimson, Rhapsody in azure.
Yeah, you get all of those, and then by the time you have all of them, then you get it.
Oh, I know. And I mean, like, even with just Rhapsody in white, like the first one, I was getting 2 to 3 levels every experience chain. Like, when my chain would finally expire, it was around chain 6 to 8. I would have gotten 2 to 3 levels. And so one experience chain, and I'm having to move to another camp. Like, it was ridiculous. Esha Zeta. Well, and to that I will say, I've never felt that the leveling grind was the game in Final Fantasy XI. And that's why people that talk about era and they're talking about, oh, you only get 200 experience for an IT kill It's so great. I don't think that's the good part of it. I think the grind is honestly a little much, especially on here where experience is, quite frankly, still a little skewed to the wrong direction, skewed to the lesser direction. It's less than era. But the key thing of the leveling grind is that for people that cared, they properly learned their jobs in that time. Abyssia took away the leveling grind. You could go from 1 to 99 in 10 hours because of Abyssia.
Yeah, Abyssia is never I quit.
See, I enjoyed Abyssia. And truthfully, I feel like... Okay, so I didn't care for the level cap increasing to 99. It was...
That felt like a mistake.
I feel like it was a mistake because I think that the horizontal progression that Final Fantasy XI always offered at 75 cap era was more rewarding. Less dopamine, but more reward. Like more of a lasting reward. Because you're not replacing... Like, you get this gear and it's something that's going to last you. Even if it's only useful for one action, it's still going to last you. And so you're not constantly replacing gear with new... which means that you're not getting those huge dopamine hits regularly, but the gear that you have feels more valuable.
Yeah, for sure. You feel like you actually earned something.
But
As opposed to like WoW style. Get a level up, get a piece of gear. Get a level up, get a piece of gear.
but I feel like
No attachment.
Abyssia was like what Abyssia was the best balance of Final Fantasy XI. If everything in Abyssia had been designed the same way as it was, just around level 75 instead of progressing up to 99, I think 11's retail audience would be humongous. I think that it would have been the highest retail audience they had ever seen because of that. Just because Abyssia, like that would have kept all of the level 75 content relevant. Things like Ninurta's Sash would still be best in slot waste, and that's coming off of the hardest, most notorious NM in the game. All of that content would still be relevant because the stuff wouldn't have been replaced, and then you would have had Abyssia to be the more casual content, because Abyssia is casual content. And from its release, it has always been casual content. The Empyrean weapons are casual Rima. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think they should outdo the others, but I think they should be just as viable. I don't agree.
99 caps.
But see, that's taking the approach that the level grind is the game, and I don't agree with that. I feel like the level grind is just the learning experience, and if you can learn the job without the level grind, then the level grind is completely unimportant and just filler. The game itself is the end game content, and Abyssia gave the casual end game content. And if they had kept everything centered around the 75 level cap instead of boosting the level cap and completely making the old stuff irrelevant, then you would still have the hardcore content outside of Abyssia that is still completely relevant, while having the casual content inside of Abyssia for those that don't want the hardcore, but they also want to have the feeling of doing something big. Because that's what Abyssia did, was it gave everybody the opportunity to put out big numbers, take down big bosses, and have fun.
Yeah, that's my point though. It didn't feel, it felt catered. It didn't feel
Absolutely. It was 100% catered to the casual.
glowing.
I don't disagree there. What I'm saying is.
Also, when you MMOs, the core element of the MMO is leveling one again.
I don't agree there. WoW's a perfect example of that. WoW doesn't even begin until you hit the level cap.
Let me make my point for a second.
Not everybody is going to do the in-game content. Not everybody. A lot of people just want to hang out, meet cool people, and go on adventures. If you're leveling in a party or just with a handful of friends or even solo, that's exactly what you're doing. You're going to new areas, fighting new monsters, doing new quests, and you're taking on new elements and aspects of the land from that 1 to 75 journey.
And that.
If you just take people and go, okay, we're going to go to this one area, we're going to boost everybody to 75, and then everybody's going to continue from 75
To start their journey at 75.
You take out like the wonder, the mystique of the journey, and the journey is a big part of the experience.
That is a
Otherwise, you could just
completely.
go play a MOBA.
Yeah.
Go play a MOBA.
That's a completely viable. That's a completely viable stance of an MMO. I'm not discrediting that, but at the same time, that's widely the exception and not the rule. Most people that play MMOs, like the vast majority of people that play MMOs, with one exception being Final Fantasy XIV, are playing for the end game. There are few people, other than people that are trying out their first MMO, there are a few people that get into an MMO and think, hey, this is going to be the level grind for me. Most of the people are thinking, hey, what's the end game like? If they're already versed in MMOs.
Actually, because if you look at
Statistically, the in-game content is only experienced
by a low percentage.
So like, most likely the people that interact with are the people that have grabbed the concept and played in the past. So they play a lot.
Their thought processes.
What's the in-game like? But the average casual player isn't thinking about
If you pull up the statistics, yeah, if you pull up the statistics that Square Enix used to release on a yearly basis, showing like how many players on each server engaged with different content, it is counter to the no. Even taking mules and things like that into consideration, like not discounting the mules and stuff from the statistics, you were looking at like 40% of most of the servers were at 75 doing 75 in-game content back in the day during like COP and Xylart. It decreased a lot in Treasures of Aht-Urhgan, where a lot of the hardcore players left, and then it decreased again in Wings of the Goddess, which didn't really have any in-game in it. And then it boosted back up around when Voidwatch and Voidwalker came out. Those two kind of brought it back a little bit, and again, it was like that was hard stuff, but it was still very accessible. The barrier to entry was low, but it was very difficult to do, and I feel like that was also a good balancing point. But no, Final Fantasy XI, like the statistics back then, in specifically Xylart and COP, had like 40% of each server, and that was also counting mules. So when you take the mules out, not everybody had a mule. Some people had multiple mules. When you take the mules out, you're looking at probably around 70% of the server was actually engaged in in-game content.
Final Fantasy
14 numbers. There's a whole Reddit that breaks it down. Closer, some people find it
On
which is far larger than the 1% statistic, and it's also far less than the majority of the player base.
but you
Looking at the statistical numbers, in-game, not everybody does in-game, not everybody goes on to in-game content.
but you remember that I said 14 is an exception to that. Because and the reason why is the
On 14, though,
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. But 14 is an exception.
Over to WoW. We took it over to WoW, where WoW is considered the place for rating. Well, you can look at there's actually good YouTube videos where it talks about the numbers of players that actually rate in-game in WoW. And it's about 35% actually rate in-game in WoW. And it's less than that goes on in
But WoW is a so with that WoW's barrier to entry.
MMO examples.
Sure,
There are tons
sure.
of MMOs out there. If we were to go, we grab the statistics data from all of them. You know, we'd be here all day.
But when
But,
looking at
if
those,
you're just looking at the two biggest ones, it shows you that not everybody cares about it.
but when you look at the different games,
That a lot of people care about as well.
yeah, when you look at the different games though, you have to take into consideration each game's situation. WoW is notoriously a high barrier to entry. Like that's one of the things that, like, when WoW players moved over to 14 and tried out 14, their biggest surprise was that the barrier to entry for in-game content was almost non-existent on 14. Like, you can, if you wanted to buy the story skip, you could buy the story skip, get crafted gear, level up the last 10 levels, and boom, you're in game. And WoW is not that situation. The WoW's barrier to entry is notoriously high. And so, yes, WoW's
It used to be.
participation.
It used to be.
Well,
You can buy a one token and use it to buy a boost for your character. Well, first off, you can buy a boost for your character.
yeah, but
Then you can buy a WoW token, pay some to boost your character. And level, you start off with the boost, the bad. Then you can use WoW token to get your currency, to have squad, you know, crafting, the gear you need to get into the beginning of the race. Then you can use a WoW token to buy clears of Mythic Plus. Then you can use a WoW token to buy clears of the raid. And then all of a sudden you got the best gear in the game. It's a very common problem with the game, and it's the biggest complaint that most people that don't like World of Warcraft have about the game.
Sure.
The fact that you can just buy your way to the top.
yeah, pay to win in an MMO will never be successful because it doesn't teach the necessary things that need to be learned through the process. But to that, I would counter that with
a large barrier.
I would counter that with the fact that the people and sure I'm sure there are a lot of people actually buying the WoW tokens, but the people outside of the ones that are already doing in-game content in WoW, the people that are actually buying WoW tokens for that purpose are likely a percentage of the people that can't get there normally. And so
You're not wrong.
and so
but
you're taking an
there's also a
already
percentage of people that
right, but then you're looking at repeat accounts, and most of the time those statistics don't take into consideration repeat accounts. Final Fantasy statistic, like Final Fantasy 11 statistic, did, because they really didn't have a good way to segregate them, because a lot of people had mules that had leveled up stats on certain things. But so
But either way you look at it, those
in
most
most,
people don't even make it.
yeah, but again, I mean, we're looking at a fraction of a fraction that is the WoW token thing. So yes, the quote unquote barrier to entry is less now because you can just
You would
buy your
think
way
that,
in.
But WoW
Sure,
So
because
even though
people are lazy.
subscriptions are down,
Those subscriptions are down like 60-70% from where they were from around
the time of
Miss Pandoria, whenever sales started declining. The profit margins are outgrew because of the WoW.
Right, because people are lazy.
So I think they're missing a huge percentage of the market that is just buying the video game because they don't feel like doing it.
But that's still
just because they
Make it,
that's still
there's
a
huge
but
percent-
sick of people buying the way they do.
that's still a fraction of the community that's doing that. So you're I would say it's
with that
not.
argument that it's a fraction.
Is where are you getting
Well, those aren't hard numbers, but it's factual.
Numbers I'm getting are
literally from their side?
Yeah, but it's still factual. Like the first fraction is the percentage that's not already doing in-game content. The second fraction is the people that are doing that versus the ones that are not. And I would be curious to know. I mean, so here's the stuff that's not taken into consideration there. Okay, the ones that just don't want to RMT their way, they don't want to pay their way, like pay to win to get to the end game. That I would argue that a lot of them that are not, that's the reason why. And at the same time, I would argue that's probably the overwhelming majority of the people that are not doing in-game content, despite the fact that that is an option, is just simply because they don't want to do that. They don't want to spend the money on it. So while there are a lot of lazy people in the world, there are also a lot of people that may be lazy but just don't want. They're cheap.
Not only that, you
I also have people
that just don't have the time to play like
Sure.
they have 30 minutes to play it.
But
But
even
what
with
they do
that,
have are jobs and money.
even
And
with
that's
that,
actually
even with that though, that's
we don't want you to spend all your time here. We want you to have some fun.
but that's also that's a favor. That's an argument in favor of having the casual option. Because quite frankly, if I don't have a lot of time to play,
So is that what you're arguing? Is that
And I thought you were arguing that
I'm
majority of
yeah, both.
Okay, 'cause,
For
yeah,
for
I'm
many
not arguing
players,
against the casual option.
let me ask you this:
The problem
how many
with
times have
the
you heard?
casual option
But it's
is
not
whatever they're-
like for the players that want to.
Hold on.
this season, the only option you had to level up was go to this season. Nobody wanted to level up.
But then you have to ask yourself, well, why is that?
The casual option is
Okay, but you have to ask yourself, why is that? And
because if someone
A character on your face and they get
12 characters,
you're gonna go for the 12 characters.
but doesn't that support the argument that the leveling process is not the game, and rather the stuff once you get to the destination is? Because if
Get to that destination, you're still gonna have a lot of people take over.
but
see, if you did,
If you could give someone, if you could say, hey, walk 10 feet to get a character so okay, they're gonna take that step to get that character.
okay,
as opposed to going and fighting.
but
Why?
that
Because
wasn't
people,
an
no matter
option.
what, are always
Gonna take
But that wasn't an option. Like again, what I'm
doesn't
saying
matter if
is
that's the option.
no.
I'm saying the easy way is not necessarily.
I'm saying having both as an option is the better way. because there are the people that want the hardcore in-game content, and there are people that want to do in-game content but not with the hardcore mentality. And so having both options is better. And here's the and what you just said kind of solidifies it. The problem was that almost all of the available hardcore content was completely deprecated by the fact that it was like the rewards that were given, the difficulty, all of it was completely outdone by what Abyssia offered. The rewards weren't as good as what Abyssia gave. The difficulty was completely nerfed to the ground because suddenly you're 24 levels higher and you have gear that is so much better. And so again, that leads to the point of if it because Abyssia was casual. Because Abyssia was casual and it was the only in-game option.
That's not what people want.
No,
Don't just want
it's
but they will take it.
it's not
But
what a
they're gonna
large
complain
portion.
afterwards.
It's not what a large portion of the player base wanted. Because again, a large portion of the player base. But again, what I'm saying is that the ones that quit, wanted the hardcore in game, and Abyssia rendered all of that nerfed. And the reason. But if there were that many people that were dissatisfied. But again, if that's the case, they can just do it the old way. But again, if that many people were so dissatisfied with it, then they could have collectively decided to do things the old way, and there would have been enough of a player base going that direction. I argue that the fact that they didn't. Sure. I know that, but what I'm saying is
the only reason why it stuck around
yeah. But what
instead of
that's
closing it like they said,
I would argue that that's not relevant to the point though, because the point is that again, my stance is that Abyssia with what it was not the problem. The problem was that Abyssia brought the level cap up and it rendered all of the hardcore content completely worthless. Sure, but that was the key thing that it did.
that's not the only reason why it didn't.
Sure,
Quest.
sure. And
Nobody asked.
and again,
Outside the 99 cap,
right, but again, my point that
back to this, do we know that it's different?
yes, I agree 100% with that point.
And like I said earlier, I'm not arguing that they should. I agree with you. But my argument was that they went to the cat
And
So
I'm
they
not
only have
arguing.
content and they don't.
I'm not arguing
But
that
the
point at
leveling
all.
Experience, the leveling experience is a core part of the core integral part of the game that leads to it feeling like a full experience. When you just take a casual method of boosting someone from 1 to 99, you skip all that extra content in the game.
I still
Like,
mostly
of
disagree
course
with
the
that.
game is not all about leveling. It's not like this game is
Now,
nothing but leveling experience. No.
I will
But
say
the
this.
leveling experience is a core part of the game that can take it away.
I will say this. In my opinion, I think that Abyssea was the wrong solution to the leveling. I think that the leveling grind was too slow. I do feel that the leveling grind was too slow. And I do feel that Abyssea was the wrong solution to the leveling grind. In my opinion, and I actually had a big long forum post on the official forums back in the day about this before Abyssea ever came out, because people complained about how slow it was to level, and so I proposed a solution to it, and that was to take the damage of a skill chain, and for every you take your damage of your skill chain plus your magic burst, and a percentage of that damage based on your level range became a multiplier for your experience. And what that would do is that would encourage bye-bye TP burns, because suddenly TP burns are getting less experience, but it would encourage the traditional party doing proper mechanics of skill chains and magic bursts, because doing that properly now rewards you with experience. It promotes leveling your job, it promotes learning your job. It promotes learning proper party mechanics. And where I argued, I think it would have been great. And I made this post back in the height of the TP burn phase of TOAU, and so the average decent TP burn was getting like 35k an hour, where your top end was getting like 60k an hour, and your bottom end was like 15. And your traditional parties were still topping out at like 14k an hour. And what this would do this would bring your average traditional party up to around 35 to 40k an hour. Your top end, that like people that were dumping like 15k weapon skills, which was a thing back then with thieves, they would have been topping out around 60k an hour, which is about where the top end of TP burns were. And then your low end, the people that weren't able to do skill chains properly, they were left at the 10 to 12k an hour range. But instead of it being just how many bards and melees can we throw at this one camp, it now became all right, how can we push this party's damage up as high as possible with multi-level skill chains to really maximize that skill chain and magic burst damage. And I think that would have been a very fun dynamic.
Yeah, I agree. That would have been.
So yes, I agree that I think Abyssea was the wrong solution for the leveling grind. I wouldn't have had a problem if Abyssea only awarded experience if you were within 5 levels from the cap. As long as they had a proper solution for the leveling grind. But I don't personally feel that the what Abyssea did to the leveling grind was the core problem. The core problem was that it rendered all of the hardcore content that existed in the game worthless, and then didn't in turn give any hardcore content to the people that wanted it, because the in-game content that Abyssea offered was 100% casual. There is nothing in Abyssea that's hard, and it's not intended to be, and that's okay. But when you take away all of the hard stuff from the people that want the hard stuff, and then all you're offering them is easy stuff, they feel left out. And again, that happened because of the level cap increase.
Yeah, for sure. It's just you made it sound like you could take away the leveling process and drop everybody to 75, and it would be okay. That's what you made it sound like. And
I mean, you would have the problem of the people that don't learn their jobs.
It's not just about people learning.
But again, I argue against that simply because if enough people were against that leveling method, there would have been enough people doing it the traditional way. I mean,
People
wanted
want
to jump right into in-game and then have in-game start. You wouldn't. Everybody on the server right now because you can literally get to in-game in 2 days.
okay, and
once you're
arguably,
in game, you gotta grind job. You
Yeah.
gotta grind.
Narratives, you gotta grind out master levels. You gotta grind out the gear to get in between the raids for each tier.
so
And then
I will say this:
Like even at max level, that grind leveling is still there.
yeah, no, I agree with you, and I will say this: I am one of the people that I don't live for the grind. I live for the in-game content. I like the in-game content. Even on 14, I love the in-game content. Savage raiding is so much fun to me. I quit retail.
I like the grind.
Yeah,
I,
and that's
the reason
fine.
I play MMOs.
Is I like the roller coaster.
That-
I like the
Exploring, going
you hear
I like the exploration.
job.
I like getting things doled out to me in times and
Yeah, I like the exploration
I like all that
aspect,
stuff.
but
If
I
I were to just get
sure, but here's my argument there, and it's a to each his own thing. So there's no right or wrong in this, but I like the exploration aspect. The part of Final Fantasy XI that I never liked was pulling crab after crab and fighting the same crab for 3-4 hours, and you gain 1 level. That's the part I never liked. And
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
the leveling increases so
and
The more streamlined.
so with that in mind,
To push it,
yeah, with that in mind,
but to take it away altogether.
keep this in mind. So keeping that in mind, look at the fact that I quit retail in 2015 and I started up a new character on retail a few days ago to see what it was like. And the reason why I quit is not because the leveling suddenly became easy, because when I quit, I had all the jobs at 99, and I wasn't upset about how easy it was to get the 10 jobs that I had left at the time when Abyssia started its thing. I wasn't upset about how easy it was to get those last 10 jobs from 1 to 75 and then, all of them to 99. The reason I quit is because the end game changed fundamentally. And not the Abyssia end game, because I loved the Abyssia end game for what it was, which was just a casual fun experience. But that the end game of Seekers of Adoulin was when it started to become hardcore again. And Delve was a miserable experience. Like, Delve was not fun. The fun part that I had with Seekers of Adoulin in game was it was like the Adoulin version of Nizal Isle. You would run a procedurally generated map of a dungeon and get rewards based on doing different things through that procedurally generated map. That was fun, but no one wanted to do it. everybody wanted to run Delve, and Delve was miserable. Like, it was number bloated on both sides. The most successful method to do it was to have like a geomancer, a bard in each, like a geomancer and bard in each party, a white mage in each party, and then 3 monks in each party, and impetus and tear it down. Like, it was a miserable experience. It was not fun, and that was the main end game of the game at that point. And from
The reason that, like, that goes back, kind of a callback to what you said with being more casual and mainstream. And then I said, would you rather watch him put in a here in the Sode, or would you rather fight the boss, get it that way, and go, everybody's gonna pick the walk 10 feet,
right, and
Here's a Sode.
that's my
At the
point
same
that
time, on the flip
side of that, people
we're
are
always gonna do
what
offers.
and they'll just offer
yes, 100%, I agree with you there, and
So,
that's
regardless of how I-
but that's
how
why I
hard
quit.
it is, or
That-
how miserable it is.
and that's why I quit in 2015, because despite loving the game and not caring about the fact that the leveling grind was removed, because it was, and not caring about the fact that like a lot of the end game content was made casual, the hardcore content, which I still wanted to do, was just not fun. And I've never been a player that's been motivated by the reward. I've been a player that's been motivated by the content. I want to do the content because the content is fun, not because of the reward that the content is giving me. Because if I'm doing content that's not fun, but I want the reward, then I'm doing a chore to get paid. I'm working a job. I don't want to play a game to work a job. I'm the player that wants the fun content. That's why my favorite thing that I ever did in this game was back when Xylart first came out, when those of us that imported the game, or the Japanese players that were here, first got to Sky, when we first figured out, hey, this is how you pop Kieran. Oh crap, this is a really hard fight. Let's kite him around for 3 hours until we can knock him down slowly. That fight in that manner was so much fun. And then when the Zerg came out, it ruined that fight for me, because you could never do it. You could never do it the old school way of kiting it and fighting it with a balanced group of 36 people, swapping people in and out and just trying to stay as organized as possible. Like, it took a fun fight and made it a chore. Even though it was reduced from 3 hours to 45 seconds, it was still a chore for me to do it, because it was no longer fun content. And
Yeah, I mean,
honestly, the funnest part about I literally did the same thing you did.
I'd say about 6 months ago.
and see,
And then hard.
and see, the thing is now on retail, even the top end, even the top end stuff in retail now, you can do it with yourself and a few trusts. I know, and I'm saying that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. Like, I don't think that should be the case. And see, I've been of the stance that, in my opinion, the worst item in the game was Kraken Club, not because it wasn't good, it's because it was too good and it broke the best fights.
and
but
assign him to wiping.
but it's much higher risk.
It is, but that's why you
Yeah,
turns out just fine.
but I don't know. I think if they would have,
Honestly,
yeah, I think if they would have just if they would have taken a different approach to fixing the leveling grind, I don't know that my answer was the best answer for it. I personally think it was, but I don't know that it was. But I agree. I don't feel that the way that they did Abyssia for the leveling grind was the proper solution to a problem that was there. It was a problem. But I think if they would have taken a better approach to fixing that problem, plus never raised the level cap beyond 75, I think the original audience that always loved the game, the audience that we have on this server, which is humongous population, like 6,000 players online at one time, that's 4 servers worth pretty much for retail, with the exception of a couple during the height of retail's popularity. That's insane. And that population would still be on the game today. I think, because again, I don't think the casual nature of Abyssia was the problem. I think the level cap was the problem.
Yeah, I think level cap was definitely a problem. And I don't think the casual nature was. Yeah, you're right. Like, they just needed
more options.
Now, I will say this.
And I'll also say that they killed my favorite thing. And they did it in 14 as well. They killed my favorite thing.
Summoner?
Was like a fan party.
Oh.
A group of people together and
Going out
Yeah.
on
No,
the
I...
land for
talking about games and anime.
Sure.
a movie,
Sure.
sorts of stuff.
That was like my favorite part. Right.
And to that, I would still say my suggestion of an experience bonus, an experience multiplier, based on the damage that your skill chains are doing and your magic bursts are doing, would have prevented that.
Yeah, would have solved that.
Yeah.
But
then they
they chose to.
the 18 variant route in this season, or like 14 should be. And it's like, okay, well, 8
But if you played,
Oh, I did. Oh,
even
1.0
though it
was
had
bad.
flaws and its problems. Well, did you play 1.0 towards the end of the game after?
Yeah. Yeah. I've still
had,
got my
like,
legacy
frame rate
character.
issues.
Yeah. I'm a little upset though.
The graphic much better story. The leveling you do burn.
In what level of PowerPoint do you like your cutscenes? But I mean, no, I mean, yeah, I think that my answer to the leveling grind would have prevented that. It would, because it would have encouraged having a proper party put together. And again, my suggestion was more to circumvent the TP burn versus the mana burn. I mean, that was really what you had at that point. You had TP burns or you had mana burns. Which did you like? Monks, or not monks, paladins, they were left out. Leveling paladin was a nightmare from TOAU and on.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but no one could level it.
Warrior
Oh yeah. So yeah, I mean, now one thing I will say, I think that even in their base form, compared to compared to the equivalent level of the competition, I think the Empyrean weapons were a little overtuned. Or I would argue that their relic counterparts and mythic counterparts were a little undertuned. Simply put, I think, well, maybe Mandal being the one outlier there, because it was so much higher of a damage rating than Twashtar, but then Rudra's Storm was so much better of a weapon skill than Mandalic Stab. Or not Mandalic Stab, Mercy Stroke. Well, Mandalic Stab too.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
I think that the Relic and Mythics could have dealt with an upgrade quest while keeping them level 75, and then all of the Abyssia content scaled back to level 75, and Secrets of Adeline content level 75, because then you don't alienate your hardcore audience, and you don't have to scramble to come up with some new hardcore content that's just not fun. Because I think that's really what led to the advent of Delve, is that they lost the hardcore audience with Abyssia. The majority of the Abyssia players were casual players, because that's all the content that was there. The hardcore content was gone. And so they wanted to get that hardcore audience back, and so they tried to scrounge together some ideas to come up with something that was hardcore, and Delve was their response, and it was awful. And I think the reason it was awful is just because they were frantic to try and come up with something. Yeah,
You know, they had
I
14
agree.
coming out.
I agree.
They basically were leaving that server.
By that time,
Guys.
14 was actually about ready to go down. By the time
Yeah,
Adeline
so,
came out, it was about 14 went down. Actually, I think 14 already went down before Adeline came out, if I'm remembering correctly, because I stopped in 2015. Adeline had not. Adeline had just concluded, because they piecemealed it a little bit. It didn't all come out at the expansion launch, and they piecemealed it, and it had just concluded. Rhapsodies of Vana'diel had not started whenever I quit, and let's see. Yeah, because A Realm Reborn came out in 2013. So I didn't go through the missions because I wasn't interested in them, but I lived through the expansions, the little mini expansions of the Shantoto Ascension and those other two. I don't even remember what they were called. So yeah, it was when I quit in 2015. It was 2 years after Realm Reborn came out, but it was only probably a year and a half after Adeline.
I had been out of the phone
Yeah,
I
and see,
started,
like I said, I enjoyed Abyssia.
MMO hopping.
I enjoyed Abyssia, but I enjoyed it for what it was, which was just a thing to go in and have fun.
Yeah, it's just
like I said before, I love
Sure. And I will say this: if my circle of friends hadn't quit around the time Abyssia first came out, I would not have enjoyed Abyssia for what it was. I would have looked at it with the rose-colored glasses of the level 75 cap era, in that, you know, I loved the hardcore content and there was no hardcore content anymore.
yeah.
But because my circle of friends quit and I didn't have the time to dedicate to a really hardcore Link Shell anymore. Just because, you know, I was getting older and I was getting more responsibilities, just didn't have the time. Then I was relegated to the casual content, which means that my time on game was time where I had enough time to go in and do some stuff, but not enough time to really focus. And I needed stuff that I could just get done in a short period of time. And so Abyssea was that. It was stuff you could get done in a short period of time. You could spend an hour here or an hour there and get stuff done, which most of Final Fantasy XI is not that. But because of that, I got to look at it for what it was. And again, I've said this a couple times. It was never intended to be difficult. Like the Atma system. The Atma system. Yeah, it. But see, the beauty of the Empyrean weapons in the Abyssea era were that you could spend a couple hours and make real progress toward it. I thought it was, because it wasn't fun for the same reasons as the rest of Final Fantasy XI was. The rest of Final Fantasy XI for me was fun because it was challenging content that was just fun to do. But Abyssea was fun because you go in, you become really overpowered, and you just get to dumpster on things for a while. And while you're doing that, hey, you're working toward a cool weapon. And that was so different from the rest of Final Fantasy, and I don't think that was the bad part of it. Like I said, the casual nature, not the bad part. But why? But I ask, why wasn't it? And I would argue that that's a biased opinion.
Okay, so I mean, I do have precedent behind
it. I agree with that statement. I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that stance on it. I would argue that 1% of the devoted fan base of Final Fantasy didn't use Windower. And Spellcast or Gear Swap eventually alleviated that. Sure, but I will chalk that up to being that was an unwanted restriction caused by the platform that they chose to develop this game on, which was PS2. Because even though the first version that came out was actually the PC version, like the beta in Japan was PC, although the first version released. Sure. Sure. How's it going? Oh, we've been having an existential discussion on the on Final Fantasy and the differences in stances on various states of retail. I played from May in 2002, which was when the Japanese beta came out, until 2015. I was just talking about how I feel like that if they would have taken a different approach to solving the leveling grind issue than what they did with Abyssia, and if they would have made all of the content that came out from Abyssia and on to still be capped at 75, that I think the entire population of this server would still be on retail. Because
Like sometimes just adding levels isn't exactly the best way of doing it. That's kind of what happened at WoW.
Well-
Actually, WoW you got the hardware too.
yeah, and my stance is that the problem stemmed primarily from the level cap increase, in that it completely invalidated all of the hardcore content that was in the game, because it was no longer hard to kill the stuff. You could just go in and dumpster on everything that used to be really hard, and at the same time, the rewards that it gave were completely deprecated because there was much better stuff in Abyssia that was offered. And then it didn't replace that hardcore content with any hardcore content. So they literally alienated the entire hardcore population. If they would have kept the level cap the same at 75, and then just scaled all the stuff that you got in Abyssia down to a level 75 appropriate scale, then you wouldn't have invalidated all of the content or all of the armor and weapons that were already in the game. You would have given a casual option. Because that's something that the game didn't have. It never had a casual option, both for leveling and for end game. End game was always very restrictively difficult, and leveling was a massive grind. And I think that the level of grind that it was a problem. It was a real problem that needed to be addressed. I had mentioned to Pesmerga that I made a forum post on the official forums back in the TOAU days, so this was a long time ago, addressing the imbalance of the TP burn versus the mana burn, and that was really your only two options. If you were a caster, mana burn. If you were a melee, TP burn. If you were a paladin, sorry. But my proposed solution was to take a portion of your skill chain and magic burst damage dealt to a mob and turn that into a multiplier of the experience that it gave that would circumvent the cap. So instead of getting 200 experience from a mob, if you did a skill chain and magic burst that totaled, say, 4,500 damage, then you now had a 4.5 times multiplier added to that experience, and so it would now be 900 experience from that mob. Greatly alleviating the grind, but promoting proper party mechanics. So, yes, encouraging learning your job, encouraging learning how to play in a party. And
But what we were talking about earlier, how this game is
A lot of the mechanics of the game do gain coordination, so that
I be dumping on
Sure.
combat.
yeah,
skill
I
chain
agree.
and stuff like that.
I agree.
A lot of stuff gets lost.
But at the same time, if you then tweak the mechanics to allow them to keep up, if you put in, say, higher skill chain damage, higher magic burst damage, so that the traditional party can keep up in both damage and in experience, then
Yeah, fair.
you
There's some changes in the business to accommodate that.
clearly the problem. Yeah. Oh, I agree. Critical design changes would have needed to be made in order to allow for it, 100%. But clearly, like, the problem wasn't the amount of damage that parties were doing, because they didn't do anything about that. Instead, they introduced mobs that just suddenly became super squishy with Calibris. And so that compounded on the problem. Even if you didn't have the ideal damage type, they were still so squishy.
Kind of messed up with it.
Well,
Like, okay, well, what can
sure,
we do?
sure.
Let's just
But if there were tweaks that could have been made to solve the problem, and like I said, I don't feel that the solution that they proposed for leveling with Abyssia was the correct solution. But I also don't feel that Abyssia being casual was the problem. I think the problem was ultimately the level cap increase, because it was a compounding problem. Like it itself was a problem that then compounded other problems on top of itself.
but if I'm being 100% honest with you, they kind of made the level capping. But
Sure.
It was more the way they did it. Like, they didn't take into consideration any form of balance.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, when you have a player base that loves the content that's in your game, and you suddenly make all that content worthless, both in difficulty and in reward, you're killing a lot of valuable stuff in the game. And here's
But that's what I'm saying. Like, they kind of worked towards that by making people upgradable. And that would have been...
but that's only taking into consideration the reward. That's only taking into consideration the reward, though. What I'm suggesting takes into consideration both the reward and the content itself. Because again, where I feel that the game truly died was two stages. It was the fact that they killed all of the hardcore content and only offered casual content in replace. And then when they finally brought hardcore content back in, it was just not fun. Because, like I said, Delve was a miserable experience. But the difference,
That's been the part of Phomiuna. Taking those pieces of gear that people recognize.
yeah, absolutely.
Even like booster level 7, you can still
Like I mean, just simply put, for the jobs that make good use of them, there is not a better option until 65 or higher.
That was the core of it.
Yeah, I'm indifferent about that. Yeah, I don't.
I thought that was so much cool.
Yeah,
You know, I was like, yeah, that's
I don't disagree with that, but at the same time, I'm indifferent because I feel that you can have it both ways in that regard. Just giving the option, sure you can. Sure you can. Yeah, you can flex your stuff if you want.
have that choice in the game, but
Yeah. No, I don't think you should be able to glam something that's hard to get without getting it. Well, I would argue though that the reason it doesn't have quite the same effect is because it's just not hard to do. It's not a flex when you're not flexing to get it. Like, Kirin Zosore was a flex piece because originally that fight was difficult. But once it became trivial and everybody had one, well, then it was no longer a flex piece. Even before Glamour came, like the Glamour equivalent came out. Looking at 14, I mean, you can flex your glams in 14. If you've got an ultimate weapon, like you can flex that all day long.
I will say,
Sure, because of design differences. I would argue, though, that the Savage, like the 4th Savage raid of each tier, while that tier is current, is a flex. But outside of that, yeah, I would agree that there's nothing that's super difficult that is unobtainable for just about anybody. Truthfully, I would argue that literally everything in 14 is obtainable for anybody that just wants to put forth the time to learn how to do it. The game itself is not difficult, even though some of the fights are hard to learn. It's just about learning the dance and optimizing your damage enough.
Yeah, exactly. There's not a real strategy involved.
But that doesn't change the fact that some of it is a flex.
Is learning the steps.
Yeah.
Learn the steps. People really learn the steps. It's basically like
But see, that's still.
way to describe it is
old fights in Final Fantasy 11, back whenever they were
difficult.
are like trying to learn the English language. You know, there's a lot of different answers to things that you wouldn't expect to be the answer, but everyone leans towards a certain way of doing things. But not everybody can finish and complete it.
Whereas 14 rated
It's more like there's a formula to it. You can learn the formula. Once you know the formula,
formula, you know.
and it just gets
Yeah, but where I was going with that is, I don't think the glam and this. I'll accept it to each his own thing on this, but I don't think the glamour system itself is what takes away from the flex. I think it's one, having access to something that's not hard to get access to. Because if it's not hard to get access to, you're not flexing anything. Like the reason something is a flex is because you had to flex your muscles just to get it.
Exactly.
But like I said, I think that problem became a problem before the lock style became a thing in 11. And again, that goes to yes. And that's where I'm saying that raising the level cap rendered that difficult content easy, and now you were no longer flexing anything because it was trivial to get it. Looking at 14, you know, nobody's looking at relics in 14 as a flex because it's literally just grind for a long time and you've got it. Nobody's looking at old Savage gear as a flex because you can just unsync and go in and farm it as much as you want. But the yeah. Alexander was like Gordius was hard.
Like really hard.
Gordius was
Yeah.
ridiculous.
That shit was fucking that one.
But
back like it was there was more to it
But then just
you had to balance things.
yeah,
balance that.
I would argue there was also a not fun aspect of some of the Gordius stuff. Gordius was brokenly hard.
Yeah, but like
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. I
get past this thing.
have you
But
have you
now
looked at
it's
the
just, okay,
have you
she left.
have you looked at the Abyssos tier? Pandemonium 8S is restrictively tight on the DPS check. Like to the point that whenever it first came out, if you had both a paladin and warrior in your party, you could not clear the fight. Yes. It was compounded.
What's the
Yeah, Gunbreaker. Dark Knight is actually highest DPS. Gunbreaker's just right under them. And then whenever the tier first came out, yeah, when the tier first came out, Warrior and Paladin were so far below them. Plus the fact that like even with a meta comp, it was restrictively tight DPS check on the door boss. Like it was very, very hard to clear that DPS check. Even with a meta comp, and you know, if you had 2 slots that were not meta, then suddenly you were not clearing it, just simply put. But even now, it's still like they've nerfed it, and it's still very tight DPS check. Like it's 62.5k DPS, and which Party Finder is never a good example of like a fine-tuned machine, but your average Party Finder group is going to be putting out about 57 to 58k DPS.
Date on the current figures and numbers, like I said, I've only done a story.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm giving you the average Party Finder DPS as a comparison. It's a hard
A
fight.
lot of the changes in it though.
Did leave me feeling lacking, but it's good to know that the higher tier stuff they're still doing. At the very least, they have some good DPS check.
Those were always the funnest to be.
I'll argue that this current raid tier is the most fun raid tier that I've experienced. For the most part, since Shadowbringers, with the exception of the last Eden tier, I enjoyed that a lot. Specifically, the first fight of the last Eden tier, Cloud of Darkness, that fight was a blast. But Swolebunkle, man, Swolebunkle is a great fight. It's the first fight of the tier. The third fight is a great fight. The second one's pretty good. The fourth one is fun, but it is restrictively hard. Yeah, I do not want to be leader, though.
We could like test them.
I am currently getting.
I'm a jungle.
Sounds pretty good.
I need some experience.
Well, I'm trying to get there quick.
Nice.
Pretty good.
Oh, I had a party in I had a party in Zeta, like real close to the Romov zone line, on curls. Less so. Well, now much different actually. So here's the thing with Beastmaster from retail. Back in the day, Ready didn't exist. You used Sick instead of Ready, and you can't choose your TP move with Sick. It uses a random one. Also, back in the day, Jug Pets would be random between 2 and 0 levels under your max level. And then, well, so with that, so on here, on Horizon, all of the jug pets are uncapped. Meaning that, like, if you use a jug, you're going to get a pet the same level as you. There's no variance. You don't have the 2-level variance. But also, like, the jug pets themselves don't have their individual caps that they had before. So Tiger used to cap, I think, at 45. So if you were 55 and you summoned a Tiger, that Tiger was 45. The HQ Tiger was capped at 65. Courier Carry was one of very few pets from a jug that was capped at 75. That's why all the Beastmasters use Carry, because 2 reasons. 3 reasons. She's a monster of a tank for a pet. She does a great job tanking. She was uncapped, so at 75, she was 73 to 75. And then the jugs are cheap. So it was just a bunch of stuff.
You can have that, what is that?
Yeah. Bestial Loyalty is a godsend on here. Yeah, it's a godsend on here. Yeah. So a lot of things are coupling to make Beastmaster much more viable in parties. You know, I don't. Just because they're not. So Beastmaster is not restricted by lack of gear like other jobs are. Because even like you can show up naked and still contribute a strong amount as a Beastmaster just by your pet alone. Other jobs don't have that benefit, so there's that, and then there's the fact that yes, the Beastmaster pets are now boosted up to the Beastmaster's level regardless of jug and regardless of, like, there's no variance, and then on top of that, you no longer have the experience penalty for having a pet. And they took that out of retail too. It was a dumb mechanic.
Yeah, but I mean,
Well, but what I'm saying is back in the day, like back in era, you had a harsh experience penalty for having a pet whenever the mob died. Even if you were in a party. So a Beastmaster, a Beastmaster in a party, if you charmed a pet, then only the Beastmaster would experience. Or no, other way around. If you charmed a pet, everybody got the penalty. If you summoned a pet with a jug, only the Beastmaster got the penalty. But if you had a pet at all, you got the penalty. And then they took that away in retail because, like I said, that was a dumb mechanic. On here,
That's why I'm kind of excited. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like all the dumb mechanics that like I didn't like back in retail, they just went ahead and was like, okay, here's hardcore old school retail, but like all the dumb mechanics they have. And I'm like, God, finally.
I would argue that the home point warping within cities should have stayed. Take away home point warping from city to city, but within one city, it's the best quality of life. Sure. Sure. Yeah. No, I can agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, no, I can agree with that, and you know, keep the the home point warping within a city. So if you're in Juneau, you can warp into some other area of Juneau. I will say I am 100% in favor of the retail movement speed. This movement speed is painful. It feels like it doesn't fit as far as like animation goes. I don't like this movement speed. And this is the original era movement speed. I like what they moved it to, which is double this. And I don't feel that the like doubling this movement speed takes away from anything.
I will say the game feels a lot better now. Like, I was talking to Tessa earlier about like the old school days like you
And
do I have everything? I make sure, check everything, check my bags, make sure I got everything I need for the next like 10 left. Yeah,
And I would argue that taking the travel time from Bastock to Valkurm Dunes from 25 minutes to 12 and a half minutes wouldn't take away from that. That's still a lot of time to travel there. And that's literally double the speed.
But it would lower the scale. The world wouldn't seem as big if you could just
I can see that point. I can see that point for most people.
Also, same with
Yeah, I can see that point for most people. I would argue that's a perception thing, and everybody perceives things differently. Because,
I mean, perception is very important.
yeah, and so I'm not arguing against that point because that's a perception thing. Me personally, I perceive things how they are rather than how they appear to be. In the same way that, so my mother always used to say dark colors make a room look smaller. And I've always looked at the room and went, no, it's the exact same size. Because I don't perceive things how they appear to be. I perceive them how they are. So that's just different ways people's brains work. And that's why I won't argue against that, because I know that other people do perceive it differently. But then the question is, which is the better stance? The stance of, because it doesn't take away from the I don't want to make this trek again because it's still 12 and a half minutes, it's okay, or because it does take away the scale for some people, is it not okay? I would argue that once you've already experienced the world, the grandiose nature of the world being reduced a little bit is less of a detriment. Sure, yeah. Yeah. And so yeah. But that's the reason why I would argue that while there is a difference in perception regarding the scale of the world with the higher movement speed, I don't feel that it's enough of a detriment to offset the benefit of the quality of life of it. Just because, like I said, the movement speed's painful at this level.
You can
Oh yeah.
argue that
Yeah.
run faster than kind
Yeah.
of like splitting it.
Yeah, or
You've also got, you know, you got Chocobo Mazurka.
bars. You got flea boots that people can get. You've got Strider boots. You've got the Crimson Cruises. It's like all of these things are like rewards for movement. So like people need to start to get that travel time down.
Yeah, but at the same time, a lot of those methods are restricted to specific jobs.
But it's a better reward
Putting that work in.
I mean,
Hey,
the-
put this work in.
though. I can work run faster than you guys.
But that reward remains proportional regardless. So I'm of the stance that increasing the movement speed up to what retail currently is, which is
Some
not,
people
even though it's
favor
double.
the movement speed change.
There's some people
Sure.
Like, I'm not gonna go for the
the distance doesn't bother me. The movement speed doesn't bother me.
Sure.
and
But
you've got
I
people
would-
that, like,
I would say
would
that's not the
love to move
majority.
Faster because I hate going.
That might not be the majority, but I didn't get Strider boots. Actually, I did get Strider boots on Soul. I didn't go for Crimson Cruises because I wasn't that worried about the movement speed. It didn't bother me. There was plenty of other avenues of travel that running a little bit faster didn't bother me. Whereas most of the people that I knew that were like red dated, like you gotta get the Crimson Cruises. So I'm like, I know I'm not that worried about it.
But here's my question.
Definitely understand.
Want to be able to run faster and stuff, and that's perfect. That's why that item is in people that use on it.
But then I would argue
It
make
adds an
that
element of reward.
yeah, make that reward possible for all jobs then. Because it's not. Like there are jobs that simply don't have any form of movement speed increase. And so
Like,
then
it always sucks.
Yeah, what good is if everyone
well
What
flea
good is Chocobo Mazurka?
flea compounds
Like that.
flea compounds about upon all the stuff until you hit the cap.
but that's one of the flavors though of like the movement speed here. Either you have to work for it or you have a job that has it here. And either way it's a boon for that class.
But again,
This
that boon
this
is not
very
di-
much a game.
that boon
This
is not
very much a
diminished
game
though.
About not being.
Most people want to be quality. This is the game that's about not being.
But I don't agree with that because taking thief with flea.
That's about equality and everyone has the same movement.
There's plenty of games that offer that. This is what's special about it.
But what I'm saying is when you I'm not talking in regards to things like flea. I'm talking in regards to things like Strider boots. Any equipment that gives you movement speed. When you have jobs that simply can't have access to something that does, then you are. It almost feels like punishing those jobs for not being the other jobs. With something that is specific to a job like flea is. Flea is not diminished by other jobs having access to movement gear, because one, thief does have access to movement gear, and two, flea compounds upon that movement gear up to the cap. Now, similar forms of movement speed increases don't stack with themselves. So if you have two pieces of movement speed gear, they don't stack with one another. If you have two forms of movement speed increase stat, they don't stack with one another. But different forms do stack. And so, yeah, the problem is, so take thief with flea versus sub thief with flea. once you hit level 54 and you have access to the shoes, the artifact shoes that increase the duration by, is it 10 seconds? 15 seconds. 15 seconds. You now have a much longer duration of flee, which is very impactful. To the point that... Yeah, no, I'm not saying that it's a problem. I'm saying that's a good thing. It's something that sets Thief main job apart from Thief sub job. And that's not a problem. My issue is that when you can keep the flavor of the job while boosting the floor up. And if it's something that needs to be worked for, as if every job has access to some kind of movement speed gear that you have to work toward, fine. If say there was a merit job trait that all jobs can learn, if you learn it on one job, you got it for all jobs, and it just boosts your floor movement speed. Great. It's something you're working toward, and it pays off in the end, but it's not restrictive to one job. I'm not saying every job should get an ability like Flee, because that would decline from what makes Thief feel special. Yes, I agree with that. I'm saying that the current movement speed is painful. And I don't think that even the retail movement speed would be a detriment. Because, like I said, so the current movement speed is 40. That's the stat for the movement speed as far as the game client is concerned. The retail movement speed is 80. It's literally double. You're moving at 80 units per movement unit versus 40. And I don't feel that even at 80, it's so much that it takes away from anything in the game. I've played on a couple private servers that are like 100, and the difference between 80 and 100 feels humongous. Sure. My thing is, yeah, my thing is that, one of the things that I thought was a huge positive on retail when I tried it out the other day was the movement speed difference. I didn't feel that it, and I will argue that my experience is tainted because I've explored every zone. I've done basically everything that retail had to offer up until 2015. And so I don't have the fresh glasses to look at this game in. And so because of that, the enhanced movement speed to me is less of a detriment as to somebody that would be experiencing it fresh. And I'm surprised at the number of players that have been on Horizon experiencing this game fresh, but I also don't feel that the retail movement speed would take away from that experience. It wouldn't take away from the grandeur of the game, because realistically, the game is a pretty grand game. I think, let me put it this way. I think that,
No matter what, you probably won't be happy.
well, see, that's the thing. I was quite happy with the speed on retail the last couple days when I was playing on it. I was quite happy with it. I don't agree with that. But what I'm saying is, regardless of that stuff, the traveling I did have to do, but I did feel it. So in that game, because I started this character from scratch, I had to make the trek to Juneau on foot, because I didn't realize that there was a thing called Unity warping. because Unity didn't exist when I quit in 2015. And somebody told me after I made it to Juneau that that was a thing. But that movement speed difference, I felt it. Like the trek to Juneau on foot taking 25 minutes instead of 50 minutes was humongous. Yeah. And that would make a difference not feeling it.
I did start fresh, but I didn't want to reset. I knew how long it would travel, and I never had fun.
Yeah, and so
90% of that.
And so what I'm saying is if you take just the retail movement speed, slap it into Horizon how Horizon is without all the teleport methods, like with the era teleport methods that we currently have, it would be something that you would feel, and I don't personally think it would be detrimental.
We'll have to agree to disagree, 'cause
Sure.
I don't feel like it would be changed.
Again, to me, this movement speed is painful, and I was very happy with the movement speed that was on retail.
Pretty happy with this movement. If it's faster, I'd take it. If it was slower, it wouldn't. But I don't feel like the movement speed warrants.
They might increase movement speed when they start advancing through when did they increase movement speed in retail?
It was after 2015. Like it wasn't there when I quit. Yeah, it was after Adeline. Like I said, I played from May of 02 until 2015. And it wasn't there until
Like the way
It does like start slow, and then increasing. It makes sense. It's the same as your attack speed is slow, but then you got the haste spell where you start letting techniques gear, and like
the attack speed gets
it's something that changes as you go, and I think it works really good.
and
so like to me,
It doesn't add adding
movement speed.
out the get go, being a little bit faster doesn't really add.
but does it take away from it?
No, it really doesn't. It won't take away.
And
But
and so
leaving it the same.
Also doesn't add
but to that, I feel it. I feel the difference immensely. And so you're saying that you don't feel it, you wouldn't feel it? Some would. And
Because like
you said, I didn't like this game for a long time. I've been through it. So,
zone in the game
Sure.
several times.
you know, I'm not on one shot at the scale of game.
Yeah.
Also, I got my.
Nostalgia.
sure.
So like if it were to change me,
I would.
And so that's where I'm saying that my stance is I would argue that most people would be in your shoes where it wouldn't really matter. I think that
feel
the
like it
number,
would hurt the scale.
and again,
For
I
new people or people returning.
I put that up to that's a perception thing, and I'm not going to argue against that because people perceive things differently. I don't think
Well,
that
I mean,
I don't think it
that's
would
the
be so
perception.
much that it would I don't think it would ruin the
The
experience.
perception is there.
Right, but
Yeah, I mean-
what I'm saying is I don't think that it would be so much that it would ruin the experience for anybody. I'm not arguing that it wouldn't reduce the scale for some people.
Ruin the experience.
More like it would be a completely different experience.
I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the
Instead
case.
of, instead of
Like that dreaded, oh man, I've got to active plan because the trip takes a long time. Like, oh, the trip's really not that bad. I'll just go back to town.
But see,
it's
I'm
a
again,
completely different experience.
I think that taking that trip from 25 minutes to 12 and a half minutes on foot would not have that effect. I wouldn't do it. If I cared about 25 minutes, I would also care about 12 and a half. I mean, you're looking at 25 minutes, you're looking at almost an hour to make the round trip, and at 12 and a half, you're looking at 25 minutes to make the round trip. I wouldn't do that. If I cared about the 25-minute single way, like one way, I would care about the 12 and a half minute one way also. That's a long time to travel. For me to not care about it, it needs to be less than 5 minutes. About that party. We got 2 people deafened. I'm still surprised that I haven't gotten a party invite this whole time I've been on. All right, folks. I think we're gonna call it a night there. It's kind of an uneventful night. The one thing I had planned, they decided to do without me. So yeah. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe. I will catch you all next. Have a good one.